Right, let's expand on the conversation. Roping in clinical psychologist and founder of Cohesive Collaboration, Sikander Kalla, who joins us for more. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, just listening in to just only one individual talking about their experience when it comes to the workplace, which has now become a dreadful place for her. She spoke a bit about waking up to go to a job she loved is now very, very stressful. What are the factors that develop and sustain a toxic workplace culture?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening to the viewers. Yeah, I think the main thing to focus on here is the sentiment of it's a multivariate issue. There's multiple reasons as to what propagates this. And like you rightfully pointed out, we must think about all the particular factors. I would say often it comes from a place of ignorance, and that ignorance is rooted a little bit more in just a lack of awareness in what are the particular triggers of mental health difficulties, what are some of the dynamics that exacerbate existing mental health conditions or can even trigger new mental health conditions. And I must say that ignorance sometimes is coming from an innocent place, and that's why we need more mental health awareness campaigns, especially with this being Mental Health Awareness Month. I think speaking about it like this really helps quite a bit in reducing the amount of ignorance from that perspective. But then I think certain times there's also a certain level of complacency in which individuals don't necessarily even want to seek out insight and knowledge into all the mental health difficulties that employees may experience. And that allows for a bit of like plausible deniability on some level. But I think if we want to increase accountability in this space, we need to realize that if you're an employer or if you have a senior role or supervisory role, it should be your responsibility to educate yourself on some of these dynamics and then to think, how can I play a role in bringing the best well-being for my employees so that I can not only get the best output from my employees, but that I can also create an overall holistic, good workplace environment. So I think it's that. And then on the far extreme side, we must also acknowledge that people in the workplace are also still people at the end of the day, and human beings are imperfect and human beings are flawed. And sometimes people are susceptible to competition, they're susceptible to malice. There's so many different factors that may play out that even in personal relationships play out. It's the same in the workplace. So I think it's a myriad of issues, starting with things that are a bit more innocent and benign, with things that are a bit more malicious. But I think the full spectrum of it is such that we need to do something about it.
You speak about the role of leaders in a workplace. I mean, hierarchy in itself. Can the toxic culture stem from pressures to perform? I mean, not using it as an excuse, but just looking at some of the contributing factors.
Exactly. You know, that even individuals that are maybe in a more senior position, they still reporting to someone. They still have to meet certain deliverables and outputs. And they, sometimes we villainize the superiors or the people in higher positions. But I think we also forget that they are accountable and beholden to certain structures as well. So if we just humanize them on some level, it starts creating a bit of empathy in both directions. And I think if we get caught up in one is the perpetrator, one is the victim, people then tend to just defend themselves if they feel like they're being accused of being a perpetrator of a toxic environment. And people that feel like they're being victimized by someone from that position feel a deeper sense of helplessness and hopelessness. So it then just creates this vicious cycle where it's exacerbating it in both directions. So I think it's important to humanize in all regards and to say, okay, fine, now that we've done that, what is each person's responsibility? What is each person's role? And can they play their part?
What impact does it have on an individual who finds themselves in such an environment? I mean, the one lady who was speaking to some of my colleagues spoke about how she realized that she needed help when she couldn't perform as well as she used to perform, and that in itself was a red flag for her.
Yeah, it's quite common. The same disorders that one may experience in their personal life, one can also experience in the workplace setting, and sometimes even more severe forms of it. So you look at the myriad of depressive symptoms that a person can experience, anxiety symptoms, all of these conditions come with some drop in functionality. And they also affect one's routine and structure. So you may find there may be difficulties with sleep, with appetite, with memory, attention, concentration. And the more that these difficulties intensify, the more the person feels anxious about their job security. And the more anxious you feel about your job security, the more it starts exacerbating that anxiety in general. So it then just starts to spiral so quickly. Hence why it's so important to catch these things quite early on. I think workplace settings have done quite well with employee wellness days when it comes to physical health checkups. But I think the mental health checkup portion of it has been lacking. Often the mental health spaces are somewhat superficial in nature. It feels more compliance based. And it's like you're entitled to maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4 consultations, but it's almost like get on with it. Get your consultations, keep it moving, rather than creating comprehensive, holistic, systems that catch individuals, not only from a reactive perspective, but also preventatively. That if we talk about preventative mental health initiatives, I think we can go a very long way in the workplace setting as well.
And very quickly, options when it comes to help, where do people go?
Yeah, often the best support systems are the ones that you trust. So I would say even if it's something work related, start off with your personal relationships that are most nourishing, most valuable, most trusting. Speak to someone, confide in them, just so that you feel like you're not alone in it, that you have someone beside you to go through it with you. And then it also helps to speak with fellow employees that you feel quite safe around, that you've built a reliable, trustworthy relationship. So again, you can see if some of you are experiencing shared difficulties and then go through the appropriate escalation channels. In South Africa, we have great labor laws, but how we utilize that and implement is a different story. So I think for individuals to use HR channels if they feel safe to do so, for individuals to explore some of their workplace employee assistance programs, employee wellness programs. I know there's always a hesitancy from a trust perspective, what will get back to the employer, but I think that should be something that's declared from the outright that everything I say in here is confidential. And us as practitioners, as psychological practitioners, we're bound to the standards of the Health Professions Council of South Africa and the confidentiality parameters of that. So if that is done in an appropriate manner, I think that can create a trustworthy relationship.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. We're going to have to leave it there with clinical psychologist and founder of Cohesive Collaboration, Sikander Kalla, of course, expanding on the very important topic of mental health in the workplace.